0809 4440981. And you could also tweet at Smooth981. My analysts this morning, Cheta and Mr. C. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Cheta. Good morning, Lagos. I hope we had a good weekend, and let's brace ourselves for the presidential visit.
Wow. Yes, indeed. And that is happening today. But let's go on to our first story. And this one is coming from Business Day. The federal government is set to introduce a labor statistics system that unemployed Nigerians, whether home or abroad, can actually apply for jobs in Nigeria from. Chris Ngige, who is the Minister of Labor and Employment, told a news conference this in Abuja that this was part of government's efforts to help tackle the high rates of unemployment in the country. And this statistics would be available in 2 months.
Okay. So thank you, Zibby. And I read the story and I just chuckled, and I'll explain why. So yes, we have a serious unemployment problem, and a good portion of the productive labor force is currently unemployed. Now, the federal government, in its perceived wisdom, has decided that matching unemployed people with prospective employers is a way of addressing unemployment. I don't know what they read. I don't know what they drank. I'm not sure how that addresses unemployment, because the employers who are looking for employees know how to get them. Now, what are the causes of unemployment in Nigeria today? We do not have enough small and mid-scale businesses doing enough business to employ people. You have the unpredictable regulatory landscape. You have your power challenges. You have your fuel challenges. You have your general insecurity, which prevents the investors with the financial muscle and the financial know-how from coming in to invest. And the Minister of Labor comes up with this and tells us that we set up a portal that can match employers with unemployed people home in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. Excuse me. It's really excuse me. How does that address the fact that the manufacturing industry is contracting? And for the first time since Q4 in 2020, there was a decline in growth. How does that address the need to create jobs? Because every year in our educational system, there are millions of students who leave secondary school that cannot get into Nigerian universities, federal or private. What are we expected to do with that growing army of Nigerians who have nothing useful to do? One would think that the Labor Ministry would sit down with the private sector and come up with innovative ideas. You have the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Have you actually sat down with them? You have the chaps at the business school. Have you sat down with them? Have you even spoken to our good friend Cheta? Consult him, pay him his fee, and he'll come up with ideas. But really and truly, this is quite disappointing, because we already have private firms offering these services. So what is new? And in any event, from our recent experience, our recent history, anything the government gets involved in never ends well. It starts well. Along the line, the usual government indifference sets in, and then we don't know what happens at the end.
Okay, let's move on to the next story. This one
No, I beg, let's not move on. Oh, please, let me choke my out in this thing.
All right.
I don't know why Mr. C chose to usurp this one, and then the legal story gave it to me, even though he's a lawyer. See, this thing that they are doing is just the typical hiding to nothing. Basically, the job of a government is to create an enabling environment and then get out of the way. They have refused to create an enabling environment and instead keep pushing more and more difficulties in the way of business. There's no small SME in the country now that will not tell you that they are not being harassed for one fee or the other. There's none. I mean, just at the gate of the station here, we have all sorts of notices being pasted. We have we have, if you say you want to move a basket of gari from Kafanchan to Lagos, do you know how many levies you will pay along the way in different local government areas? All of these things make it difficult for businesses to operate, and thus make it difficult for businesses to hire people. So I want, and then they don't. There's no need to create an extra geek and apoya. This
English. Thank you.
what they call you. Please keep extra labor statistics system when you already have the NBS that you have refused to fund for an unemployment survey since 2020. Ever since the official results came that showed that we had an unemployment rate of 33%, youth unemployment rate of 42.5%, the NBS has been unable to publish another labor force statistics survey. Why are you creating a labor statistics system when you have the NBS that and you're refusing to fund? Because you know that the figures that the NBS will bring us will not flatter you. There was something that Mr. C said, which I want to pick a bone with, because he pointed out that the economy had grown since Q4 2020.
I didn't say grow, I say contracted.
No, you said it's contracted for the first time since Q4 2020,
correct.
Which means it had been growing since Q4 2020. Okay. It was basically, with the exception of the Russia-Ukraine thing, what had been happening since Q4 2020 was a correction back to the pre-COVID levels. So it's not as if there was anything special that they did that made the economy grow. It's important to put that context out there so that people will know.
Accepted. So final point, Zibby.
Mm-hmm.
This administration, along with other administrations, has continued to build enduring monuments to mediocrity. And this is just the latest stage or latest phase in the building process. And come February 25th, Nigerians collectively must put an end to all this nonsense. Vote, get your PVCs, come out and vote.
All right. Orov sends a message through on WhatsApp, and he says, it's very sad that at this stage of our lives, the Minister of Labour is cracking jokes with employment because the statement is a joke. It doesn't address anything, nothing at all. We have all the data. What does an extra portal solve? Let's move on to The Nation. President Muhammadu Buhari will today lead the All Progressives Congress presidential campaign for a rally in Bauchi State, and that rally is scheduled to hold between 8:30 and 11:30, and he'll also arrive in Lagos for the commencement of a 2-day working visit to the state. Now, he'll be accompanied by the governor of Lagos State for the inauguration of the largest seaport in sub-Saharan Africa, and tomorrow he'll inaugurate the MRS lubricant factory in Apapa.
I don't even know where to start, and I have to be very careful because, number one, our current outgoing government doesn't take criticism very well. Number two, I was very critical of them on the second Niger bridge, which was, even though it hasn't been inaugurated, was opened for use during the Christmas period and has been closed again. So it's just very interesting. But now let us start. This Lekki deep sea ports, while it is very necessary and it is very welcome, my big problem with it is access routes. We are only going to create another Apapa in the Lekki area. That's what's going to happen, because we've not done full integrated transportation out of the place. So you will end up congesting that area without being able to evacuate goods. We already have a traffic problem in Lekki, and yet you are doing this without doing what's doing the needful. Yes, and again, I think it's important to point out that I'm picking my words very carefully. Secondly, this blue line that they want to, the blue line, if we remember, the whole project for blue and red line started in 2008. Peking, where they born 2008, don't they already born in Peking?
Seriously?
Probably not.
Seriously?
Where a girl that was born in 2008 is 13.
Yes, sir.
We have Ahmed Sani Yerima, who is still a free man And if
Let's
if
stick with the
memory
subject
serves
for the
me,
day, Cheta.
the point I'm saying is that in various parts of Nigeria, a 13-year-old girl is seen as being able to have her own children. So,
Okay.
bottom line is,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Proceed.
the bottom line is that this project started a very long time ago, and you're only inaugurating one part of the
Seven
of
lines. There were 7 lines proposed. This is the only line ready.
the blue line is not ready. That's the point. The only
And
part
this
that
is the
is
line
ready,
they presented as being
the
ready.
only one that is ready is from mile 2 to CMS. There's a huge distance from mile 2 to Okoko. He's going to witness the signing of the start of the second phase of that, which is mile 2 to Okoko. So it's and I mean, a few weeks ago I was in Satellite Town, so I know that that is not ready. The mile 2 to Okoko bit. So now, maybe I want to be a bit nasty like some of my friends and point out that when Sanwo-Olu did that line, this is supposed to be an electric line. When Sanwo-Olu did that inauguration a few weeks ago, it was a diesel locomotive that pulled the line. But let's not be nasty like that. The point is, I don't understand this obsession with commissioning projects and doing I've lost my train of thought. Bottom line is, I'm just very unhappy about the traffic that this is going to cause, because whenever Buhari comes to this town, everywhere is traffic. Anyway, we'll just sit down fast.
All right, let's know what your thoughts are. 0809 444 0981. And we're going on to Punch. And ahead of the 2-day Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the central bank, which starts today, financial experts have expressed diverse views on possible outcomes of the rates. Now, experts and researchers are saying MPC may likely favor a smaller rate hike in the short term. And yeah, Mr. C, what do you think about this, really?
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So this is very interesting because last year we saw the CBN, I think, raise the interest rate about 4 times. Now there's an MPC meeting fixed for Thursday and Friday this week, I believe. And experts they're divided as to what the CBN is going to do. Some experts believe that the CBN will not raise rates. I will tend to watch the situation. However, some other experts say that we're likely to have a rate increase. It might not be that much, but there will be a rate increase, because if we follow what the CBN has been trying to do over a period of time, we'll notice that they're trying to reduce the amount of money in circulation. Now, with this new Naira redesign policy, which if fully executed and properly implemented, will lead to a reduction in the volume of money of cash within circulation, it then points to the fact that we should see another rate increase. However, traditionally, in years gone by, the CBN has tended not to increase the interest rate in January because they've tended to want the economy to stabilize after the celebrations and the beginning of the new year. Well, let's see what happens, because when we look at central banks in Western nations, they've all favored slight increases in their interest rates. And it is worth pointing out that the CBN will also take into consideration what its fellow central banks are doing in arriving at its own decision. Now, I'm not by any means saying that the CBN is bound to follow what the other central banks are doing, but they would follow them, they would study them to understand the logic and then see whether they can apply it here. But all in all, I would suggest that based on my understanding of what's going on, I will not be surprised to hear the CBN raise the interest rates, maybe between 50 basis points to 100 basis points. But will there be an increase? I think so.
All right, let's take a quick break.
Let me use up again.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is this is when lawyer is talking interest rates and all of that stuff. See, why do central banks raise interest rates? Interest rate is basically the cost of borrowing money. And raising interest rates is one of the tools in the box of a central bank to combat inflation. What is Nigeria's current inflation? Very high. The CBN held interest rates at I think was 13 to 15% for a very long time before they started raising it again in fairly recent times, and now it's at 16.5%, which means that if you want to borrow money from a bank, you are not going to get anything less than 22% or thereabouts. This means that what this means is that it should reduce demand and as a result reduce inflation. The question we should be asking in Nigeria is, why is it that this thing that works in other countries doesn't work in Nigeria? And for me, the answer is largely infrastructural. We have other issues that contribute to inflation in Nigeria before you even start talking of interest rates. So for example, security, it contributes to inflation. Infrastructure or the lack thereof contributes to inflation. So what we should be doing is we should learn to look at other things in our economy that work together and then start making demands for these things to be improved. Otherwise, they will keep raising interest rates. And if they keep raising the interest rates, it means that a lot of businesses will be squeezed out of the market, will not be able to do what they need to do to expand and all of that. And then that unemployment that we talked about earlier will only rise even more. Kakuna.
I've got a few messages coming through, and this one is from EK. EK says, again, rate increase is not a proper tool when faced with cost push inflation. And this one is from Joseph Menyi. He says, has the Labour Minister settled with lecturers and ASU? Common economics will tell you that give a workable environment, power, free-flowing traffic, security, less bottlenecks, tax and policies, and businesses will grow, expand, and employment will skyrocket because all indices are working positively. We're taking a quick break. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
First Bank.
This is Smooth 98.1.
In every state, in every city, every town, village, and community, fast money agents are making all the difference, making things easier for all, making extra cash as a reward. You too can be a fast money agent, putting smiles on faces, and extra cash in your pocket. When I turn you on my, save money, take money, make money. Don't be yours, come here, promote. Fast money agents. When I turn you on my, save money, take money, make money. Don't be yours, come here, promote. Your fast money agents can be.
To register as a First Money agent, visit the First Bank branch closest to you. First Money, close and simple. You first. First Bank. This is Smooth 98.1.
Smooth 98.1. This is a Freshly Pressed. As always, we love you to be a part of the conversation. Let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And you can also tweet at Smooth 981. And let's go on to The Guardian. Now, following the outbreak of an unknown deadly flu in China, which has unfortunately led to death of residents, including 3 Nigerians, the federal government may reactivate the COVID-19 isolation centers across the country. Now, there's an outbreak of diphtheria in Kano State, which at the weekend has claimed 34 lives. Edo State recorded 10 more cases of Lassa fever, which raises the total number of confirmed persons to 81, with 8 fatalities as well. Now, this memo comes from the Office of the Secretary to the Government of Federation, addressing the Minister of Health and what this deadly flu portends for Nigeria.
Well, I think this is one of those places, at least from an administrative point of view, our responses with respect to viral outbreaks is actually quite good. And it's one of those places where we've kept the structures from the Ebola outbreak of, was it 2014? We've kept those and we've actually improved on them. I'm very proud of the mature and level-headed way in which they've handled thus far what is happening in China. and rather than rushing to ban Chinese people and basically alienate a geopolitically important country, they've done it in a very level-headed manner. However, the challenges for a country like Nigeria remain very, very infrastructural. Remember that when COVID happened, we shut down, but because of our very poor ability to distribute stuff, the lockdown was not effective and a lot of people got poorer. And we could see what happened at the end, following the NSAS protests in October 2020, in October 2020, when a lot of warehouses that were filled with stuff for people were eventually broken into, and we found large-scale hoarding. Now you juxtapose this with the fact that we're having a diphtheria outbreak. We have the occasional cholera outbreaks, and then we have had this rolling Lassa fever outbreak that has been on for quite a while now. These are things that are these are diseases that are largely that have largely been eradicated in other parts of the world. For example, diphtheria in 2015, there were only 4,500 cases in the entire world. And most of them were in sub-Saharan Africa, India, and Indonesia. We should be fighting very hard to make sure that these things don't happen. But these things will keep happening if we don't sort out some of these things, such as water supply for most Nigerians, clean water supply. I mean, that takes care of cholera. Clean housing, decent housing will take care of diphtheria and Lassa fever. So these are things that require a concerted governmental effort. And the when you look at the work that organizations such as the NCDC do, you will see that there's a hope, there's a shoot somewhere that we can actually get this done. The hope is that the usual that happens in this country will not happen, and all of these things, all of these efforts will come to naught. Let's hope that that's not what happens.
All right, let's go on to this day. Discos apologize as Nigerians suffer prolonged power outages due to insufficient electricity generation and allocation. Now, the outages, which started last week in many of the areas, have worsened the energy crisis facing Nigerians who've been battling with petrol scarcity and price hikes across the country since last year. Now, electricity consumers, especially those on band C, D, and E, which are the areas that receive the lowest duration of power supply, have been having these prolonged power outages since last week.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. And again, we're back to square one. We still haven't gotten this power situation correct, and I fear we will not get it correct in the shortest time period. Now, clearly, the generating companies are not generating enough power to give to the transmission company of Nigeria. Now, you can factor in a whole number of reasons. One, inadequate gas supply, scheduled maintenance of turbines, and then the fact that when they do generate power, they are forced to keep back some of the power because the TCN cannot take on everything. Then for whatever reason, the TCN2 is not giving sufficient power to the discos. So all we just hear is really buck passing. The discos have passed the buck onto the transmission company, saying that they're not getting the required amount of power, and once they get it, then power supply will improve. Now, the bigger issue is this. We do not generate or transmit enough power to meet our daily demand. And we generate more power privately from privately owned generators, petrol or diesel powered, or even gas powered, than from the public grid. And to sort out that deficit, that supply deficit, requires a lot of funding. But beyond all of this, and this is on the back of a new tariff increase, which the relevant bodies have continued to deny. So they deny it officially, but the reality is when you buy the power, that is reflected in what you get. Now, the bigger question is, when will public bodies, public officials begin to see the need to tell the people the truth and feel accountable to them? It's not enough to tell us you're not getting enough power. The relevant bodies should tell us what the problem is and not leave us to hazard guesses, and tell us the timeline, the proposed timeline for fixing it. Now, in the run-up to an election, a major election, which is a critical turning point, you have this lingering fuel scarcity that won't go away. You then tack on the power problem. What exactly is the plan? And to think the ruling party has a candidate in this election is just truly the joke of all jokes.
Okay, I've got some messages coming through. Gilbert Musa says, on the commissioning of the deep sea in Ibeju Lekki, it brings to mind the big question, the reason the Dangote refinery, originally scheduled to be built outside Lagos, was transferred to Lagos. Why do we keep choking Lagos with infrastructure? Why can't other states have a massive infrastructure as well? And this one is from Chika, and Chika says, a child born in 2008 is 14 plus now. My takeaway from the PMB visit to Lagos and commissioning of the various uncompleted projects, it's a case of, if you don't praise me, I will praise myself. Let's move on to Vanguard.
Chika, you have to me. Oh, I used to do well in maths those days. Kai, I'm feeling ashamed of myself.
From Vanguard, prison congestion, federal government and others urge to activate non-custodial special fund. Now, two non-governmental organizations involved in advocacy are stating or are saying this fund will be used to help reform first-time and minor offenders, which will go a long way in prison decongestions. Cheta?
Okay.
I don't even know where to start, because this is a Mr. Seed story through and through. It's a legal thing.
Also, let me take it.
Okay, fine.
Okay,
let me quiet my mouth.
Okay, so fine. So under the Nigerian Corrections Service Act, there is a provision for a custodial center and a non-custodial center. Well, what we find is that throughout the Federation, we have correctional centers, and these are for people who are being found guilty of violent or serious crimes. Now, there are people who commit less serious crimes, and in other crimes, in serious crimes, they do community service, they're given suspended sentences, probation, and all of that. But in Nigeria, you will find that someone who commits a minor offense is thrown into the same center with someone who's probably committed armed robbery, murder, or the likes. Now, the whole idea of the correctional system is you get in and you are corrected. You're made to see the error of your ways so that when you complete your term, you come back to society a useful member. But in Nigeria, it's almost the reverse, because each time we hear an ex-convict rearrested for the same offense. So this is calling out to the federal government. There is a provision of the law that hasn't been followed. The AGF, can you see to it that they start to provide money into the non-custodial fund, which is set up by law, so that these centers can be set up so that people who commit minor offenses do not have to go to correctional centers.
All right, well, that is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much, Mr. C. Thank you, Cheta, for joining us. Thanks for listening, and thank you for your messages. Please stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
You first bank. You first.
Thank you.
No problems. Just a lot to love.